Greetings, Yokota community. On behalf of Military Spouse Appreciation Day, we wanted to reach out to you and offer you a few resources, as well as collaborate with some of our community agencies, specifically the Chaplain's Office. Today, we have with us Chaplain Brown, who's going to offer you some resources in regards to healthy relationships.
Yes, and I am Andrea Wynn, Community Readiness Specialist. And I just want to say that those of you who sometimes call to ask about the International Marriage Seminar, that process is not owned by the Airmen and Family Readiness Center. You would need to reach out to your first sergeant or Miss Debbie Stevens, the Community Support Coordinator, in order to schedule that. But we do want to cultivate healthy relationships, and that's why we have partnered with the chapel. And with that, sir, take it away.
Take it away.
Yokota community, thank you so much for the opportunity as I'm able to speak into the camera, but into your lives right now, to speak about communication and I as the chaplain, what we have to offer from the chapel when it comes to building healthy relationships. Building healthy relationships in general is an important topic because it applies to each of us, no matter where we're at in life. And as a chaplain, I have interaction with a lot of folks, but I've also been through the school of hard knocks, if you will, with relationships. My wife and I have picked up a couple tidbits and tools along the way, and I'd like to share some of those from our personal experiences and some of the communication aspects that have come throughout our lives as we've learned to navigate this current situation and situations in the past. At the chapel, we focus on communicating well. This is something that's important because it takes two to tango, whether that be in the church, in the chapel, in the workplace, or at home. You may find yourself with your spouse, significant other in your family, a little bit more than usual, and are finding it hard to communicate. And that's why there's going to be some tools that I can give you that will allow you to reflect on maybe how you've been communicating and how to do it that much more effectively so that you can relay that piece of information without running into that intense fellowship, is what we'd like to call it at the chapel. So communication in itself is that two-way street. It's that give and that take. It takes two people to tango, like I said. So there's the speaking portion. Many people know how to speak pretty well. And if you don't know how to speak pretty well, you may end up talking a little too much as it is. But regardless the case, as you speak, there's the other end, the other side to receive, and that's listening. By implementing active listening, relationships can continue to grow on the path that they were intended. So for husband and wife, spouses, family members, sometimes we miss the mark. I've been there more often than not, where I'll say something and it doesn't get received necessarily the way that I had intended it. And therefore, the need to hone in on how we use our words, because words have power. So in effective, healthy communication, there's power in our words, the ability to speak life into given situations. There's an age-old proverb that says that there is power in the tongue to give life or to speak death. In a healthy relationship, most individuals would want to speak life into their marriages, into their families. And how we do that is through intentionality. It's through practice. Not necessarily does practice make perfect, but it gets us to a place better than we were before. So when we're speaking to our spouse, to our loved ones, we're dishing out a meal, if you will. I'll give that analogy. Is we're dishing out a meal, we're speaking. And through that process of translation, there's that digestion period where we're trying to figure out exactly what it is that the person has said. That's part of active listening. And as we continue to work on these skills, it's better off for yourself, it's better off for your spouse, and for your family altogether. So some ways to continue that increase and flow of words is through practice, by setting time aside. Because in a two-way street of communication, it takes two people or one person willing to take the time. Sometimes the hardest thing is to initiate conversation. If you remember how easy it was when you first started dating or you first started in this significant other relationship, it was pretty easy to talk on the phone for hours, right? There was easy flow of communication. So what happened? What happens is after time, we may revert to an autopilot. The same thing can be said with commercial pilots flying these big jets, and then using an autopilot that they tend to lose the skills, or some of them that they acquired at the very beginning. And then coming back to the basics, this is what I'm talking about. Communication basics. Setting time aside with an active, attentive listening ear. At the edge of your seat, if you will, showing that genuine compassion and care. Because most people don't necessarily care what you have to say unless they know how much you care for them. The same can be said in a husband and wife, a spouse relationship. If we show our spouse that we genuinely care, they're more apt to listen to us on the other side of things, thereby increasing that flow of communication. Some ways to do that my wife and I have found is setting time aside. We've done this in the mornings as we get up in the mornings together, or midday if I have the ability to come home for lunch. In the evenings as we take walks, especially during the weather being so beautiful as it has been recently, or we're at the dinner table. Having children can add a different situation to the mix where it becomes harder to communicate, therefore it takes an intentionality. You may have heard that it's important to have date nights. Even amidst COVID, there's creative ways that we can learn to connect with our loved ones if we are willing to really show that genuine care, just as you did at the beginning. Building effective communication, sometimes it's important to write things out. When was the last time that you wrote a love letter? These are things that can be helpful. Writing letters is effective because it allows you to, even in a close space, express things that are on your mind because it's been digested a little bit more, thereby sowing seeds into the marital relationship, which will blossom later on. Maybe you forgot what your spouse's favorite color is, what they like to eat, or perhaps that's changed. These conversations, going back to the basics, can renew and rekindle the flame that may be dimming. I mentioned that words have life. So as we speak life into our marriages, into our families, it's important to realize that everybody's going through something different. What may be happening at home is definitely different than what's happening in the workplace. Perhaps the kids were a little bit more active than usual, and they have to be at home at this point in time. Therefore, it puts added stresses on the relationship at home, the caregiver at home. Perhaps you've been at the workplace and your work tempo is increased. All these things add to the stresses of trying to connect. That's why it makes it even more important to have the intentionality to focus on these relationships. Because regardless of where you're at, there's the ability to change the routine. And in changing the routine, you may find yourself spending more time with your spouse. There's been maybe more time which has led to more communication, conversation, but it may not be the healthiest. What I call that in church is intense fellowship, right? So here's some tools that will help you as you may be navigating some difficult situations during this time, wherever you may find yourself. Is during times of stress or conflict in a relationship, there's upset on one side or the other. Perhaps it's both. So since there's the time to reset, since we're doing intentional efforts to change things, this is a practical tool that'll help you succeed. As if you find yourself in a misunderstanding, the first step is to find out what that other person is saying. So what are they saying out of your mouth? We'll start from our head, our logic. What are they saying? Being able to accurately understand what they are trying to say is important. And then if we're missing the mark, it's good to go down to our heart. What are they actually saying with the emotions behind it? What are they feeling? Because if we are just listening to what the head knowledge is saying, we may be missing what the heart is actually saying. And by looking at these two dynamics, we're able to bring things together to truly understand. And in truly understanding, in a given conflict, what is the most important thing that they are trying to relay? What is important to them? So that's where I'll use my finger to use the most important thing. I'm trying to understand what they're saying, trying to understand the feelings behind it, trying to understand the priority of what it is that they are saying, and how much does it mean to them? Because on a scale of 1 to 10, It'll allow me to understand and process what is important and where I may have been missing the mark. These are tools that will allow you to fully engage in a conversation where there's misunderstanding. And then being able to navigate that even further is restating and saying something like, what I'm hearing you say is this. Is that correct? Or you just said this. Am I getting it right? Because getting that pulse check is really important in order to continue this tracking with our significant others, so that we can increase a flow of communication and do something different than we may have done before. Having an active posture and listening is just as important, because we may be saying something with our words, but our body language may be saying something else. So squaring up with that individual, not in a threatening way, right? But having that engaging eye contact, putting down our phones, maybe turning off the TV, and being fully present will help to bring resolution and effective unity within any given relationship. So we restate what the person has said, understanding what they've said with their mouths, the feeling behind it, and then providing some reassurance, where one person, as they're doing this, doesn't have permission to speak unless all of these criteria are met. And once given those indicators from the other individual that these indicators have been met, opens the door to share from your perspective, so that taking turns, one person is not talking over another person, but it allows for an increase in respect, an increase in an active, genuine listening ear that shows one cares, and effective flow of communication. Now, all of you may not be in a trying time or having difficult, intense fellowship, but increasing communication is something that's important regardless of where you're at. And ways that you can do that, ways that my wife and I have done this in the past, is through reading books. Sometimes you can read a book together, whether you're together or separate, and it will allow for a flow of communication. Maybe you haven't done that before, or that was something that you did in the past. Some people will choose video gaming, some people will choose to watch a show. All these things can be helpful as long as it increases communication and isn't just a check mark on the list of doing things together. Some effective tools that can be learned are from the 5 love languages. My wife and I learned these tools when we were separate, and we're reading this book at separate times, in separate locations, but it provided a conversation for us to talk about things in the evening when I was home, or when I was able to make a phone call. The same can be said possibly for you if you do not know the 5 love languages and how your significant other speaks love and also receives love. Just an additional tool within your tool belt. I am not sponsoring necessarily the author or this book, but it's just an effective tool for something my wife and I picked up along the way. Another tool is, like I mentioned, reading books. Whether that be a thought of the day, encouraging words, or a devotional, such as from my background, being a Christian background, we have done Christian devotionals. This will provide topics that we can talk about and discuss that matter to us, and allows us to talk about things in a different way while also inviting God's hand into the mix for that effective communication. Marriage in itself is hard. So being able to pick up as many tools as possible will increase unity within a marriage and solidify that bond. So you can do this through marriage retreats held at the chapel or through some of the other helping agencies, all which strengthen and invest into the relationship, or by reading and picking up additional books. There are plenty of books at the chapel, including this one called Empowering Couples. And again, it's just tools to put in your tool belt, if you will, to increase the marital satisfaction and unity, so that once there's a strong, healthy relationship leading the family, the rest will fall into place. I've talked about a few different communication tools and some resources that we offer at the chapel. Something additionally that we offer, being the chaplain, is that privileged communication. Perhaps you've had conversations and haven't come to a place of resolution, or you've never been taught the tools, or you grew up a certain way and you want to change things. Well, myself and the team can provide a different perspective as well as 100% confidentiality, Privileged communication even goes beyond that, though, as it's covered by the AFIs, and many other safeguards are placed so that the information that is shared between a chaplain and the person that is sitting in front of me is absolutely confidential. It is not released into the public or to supervision or to command. It is truly 100%, which provides a tool for you, a place, a safe place, a haven, to be able to discuss these things and grow, as we hope that you will take advantage as much in a place of willingness as you are. So my heart's desire is to see effective communication within families. So I pray that these tools have added some value to your life, and that as you choose to continue in picking up these tools, you can reach out to the resources that I mentioned previously. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being able to listen and take in some of the tools that I've been able to give you. I pray that they are fruitful for your marriage and your family relationships. If you'd like to get a hold of myself or part of the chapel team, you can feel free to call us at DSN 225-7009, or reach out by email, or catch us on our Facebook, which is at Yokota Air Base Chapel, as you type that into the Facebook webpage. Should some of this information resonate with you and you'd like to make an appointment with a chaplain, please feel free to reach out. Our goal is to serve you and to come alongside you in your spiritual needs and being able to build those healthy relationships. So with the current state of the world, we still care and desire to grow you in your relationships. Please look out for upcoming opportunities through marriage retreats, marriage studies, and our online capabilities to connect you with your spouse and your families in the coming months. You can check us out at our Facebook, or reach out to the chapel or chaplains individually so that we may answer your questions and take care of your spiritual needs. God bless you all. Have a great day.